Mom left my dad for an ex-convict, called me lame like him, forced therapy and now wants me in her wedding. Last year, everything changed when my mom, who's 38, left my dad for Mike, her old boyfriend who'd just gotten out of jail. My parents were fighting a lot, and then one day, she was just gone, living with him. I've met Mike a handful of times, but honestly, whenever I'm at my mom's place, it's almost always just us. She tells me she doesn't want to share her time with me with anyone else, but since she got together with Mike, she's like a completely different person. Suddenly, my mom started dressing a lot sportier, like always in Lululemon, and showering me with affection all the time. She'd come early when picking me up at school, waiting outside her car, and then give me huge hugs or kiss me in front of everyone before we could even leave. Sometimes she hugs me awake in the morning. She's dragged me into her new routine, signing me up for the gym, making me do my uncle's taekwondo classes, and forcing me to wake up at 6 a.m. on Sundays, unless it's raining, for a run. I always end up exhausted in the gym. My uncle's way harder on me than anyone else in his class, and the Sunday runs just ruin my weekends. I've tried telling her I don't like it, but she insists it's for my own good, and she especially gets upset if I ever complain about my uncle being tough. Then, 2 days ago, I tried calling her because I'd left something at her place, but she didn't answer. A little later, she butt-dialed me without realizing, and when I picked up, I could hear her talking to Mike. At first, it was just small stuff, but then Mike brought me up. I heard her say, straight up, he's so lame, just like his dad. When Mike asked her if she'd choose him over me, she said, obviously I'd choose my son, and then she talked about how he should be more involved in my life so I'd end up like him, not my dad. That crushed me. I felt so mad and couldn't shake it off. Yesterday, she tried to surprise me after my uncle's class with a trip to Dairy Queen. I just couldn't talk to her at all. She got all worried that something was wrong. When she dropped me off at my dad's, I saw them start arguing again. Later, my dad told me I needed to talk to my mom because he didn't want to deal with her anymore. She picked me up at school so we could work it out. I considered just trying to talk to her like nothing was wrong, or just pretending, but she immediately knew I wasn't being real and got even more worried. Eventually, I just told her everything. She started crying, which made me feel horrible. Then things got even weirder. She started apologizing to me over and over, saying she was wrong, saying I'm not lame. She admitted she shouldn't have said any of that, and told me I'm her only child, and sometimes she gets jealous that I'm so much like my dad and she wishes I was more like her. She just ranted about how much she hates my dad, how he ruined her life, and tried to say that was why she said what she did. Then she started saying things like she'd die without me. She promised she'd never say anything like that again, swore she was going to make it up to me. And I have to admit, she really tried. For days after, she'd randomly show up at my school at lunch to drop off lunch for me, or cook special dinners, or even come help with my uncle's taekwondo class, though she's nowhere near as good as he is at teaching the lessons. But then, literally a week later, she made me start going to counseling with her, and now it's mandatory, every week. All we do in those sessions is talk, mostly about what she said that day and how I felt. We've talked about it so much now that I just feel numb and annoyed by it. She says it's helping and that she should have gotten us into therapy the minute she left my dad. To top it all off, Mike proposed and my mom accepted. She's honestly never been happier in her life. She's been spending all her free time with Mike's daughter and his niece planning the wedding. I'm still not close with Mike, but I feel like I can't say anything negative while my mom's in such a good mood. She's telling all our relatives, wants me to start writing a speech. My dad's just pissed off all the time since he found out. The worst part is that, after another therapy session where she made me talk about all this, she decided, with the therapist's support, that I should start going to my own individual sessions. She told me my uncle would drive me so I wouldn't feel pressured about it by her. But honestly, I hate it. I hate having to talk about this stuff, even when she's not in the room. I just wish I didn't have to do any of it. Update 1. It's been half a year since everything started changing, and so much is still the same, even if it feels different now. My mom is still making me go to therapy, some sessions just me, some with her. I'm actually trying, even though I fought it at first, because she made me promise to at least give it a chance. The thing is, I still don't feel like therapy is meant for someone like me. Talking about my feelings is awkward, and the first therapist I saw just didn't get me at all. I remember one session, my mom and her fiancé had launched this joint Instagram account, posting all these engagement photos, one from Tofino of him holding my mom at the beach, pointing at her abs. Kids at school saw it and some were total jerks. One girl even joked my mom probably has an OnlyFans. That made me feel weird, so I brought it up in therapy, hoping to just vent. But instead, the therapist started acting like I was a victim of serious bullying, even recommending I watch the new Karate Kid for inspiration. Honestly, nobody's bullying me, it was just a couple of dumb jokes. The way he jumped to that movie just because I'm Korean and do taekwondo was ridiculous. Telling my mom didn't help. Rather than stopping the therapy, she found me a different therapist since, as she says, I'm still so sad and tired and need help. This new therapist is a bit better, easier to talk to. He asks me to share something good from the week, not just the things I hate. So, if I have to find anything good, maybe it's how I kind of appreciate those therapy sessions with my mom now. Afterward, we go to Subway together, and it turns into an hour of us just hanging out, which I actually look forward to. I still do taekwondo with my uncle, and it's no less exhausting than when I started. My mom claims I should be used to it by now since I've done it since I was 7, but it was totally different before the divorce. It used to be casual, just me and her practicing a few moves before dinner. My uncle wasn't my coach, and I actually stopped taking classes after 5th grade. Never imagined it would end up taking over everything like it has. I mentioned to my dad that I wanted to quit, but he just told me to stick with it so my mom wouldn't flip out. And thinking back, I might have been unfair about my mom as a teacher. I'd said she wasn't as good as my uncle, but she actually coached her own girls' class once. My uncle told me she gave that up after I was born because my dad was too nervous to take care of me by himself after work. So this is the first time in over 15 years that my mom's really teaching again. My mom genuinely loves taekwondo, and sometimes I feel guilty for not loving it as much as she does. But recently, at this big taekwondo event, I ended up doing really well, so much better than even I expected. My mom completely lost it. When I came off the mat, she hugged me so tight she started sobbing, kissing me, so proud. She framed every photo from that day and even cut out the newspaper article about it. Now it's her favorite story to tell people, how well I did. To celebrate, she got me a whole Dairy Queen cake and even surprised me with a PSVR 2 and some games as a reward. It's weird, sometimes, seeing her so happy with her fiancé, happier than she ever seemed with my dad, and I can't help but wish she'd been like that when they were still together. During one of our therapy sessions, she told me why my dad went to jail. She completely believes he was innocent, but honestly, I'm not sure what to think. My relationship with my dad is strange. It's like he's trying really hard to get along with me, but always so cautious, always repeating, "Don't worry, bud, I just want us to be friends." His daughter is really nice to me, but the two of us are just so different. Update 2. My mom set the wedding for late August and somehow that made everything louder. She dragged me to a Tux place on a Tuesday after school and kept making the guy measure my shoulders again because he's grown since last month, right? Then she took me to get my hair cleaned up and showed the barber a photo of Mike from when he was 22, like that was the look she wanted on me. On the way home, she said she was proud of me for not fighting it. I told her I wasn't fighting it because it's not worth the fight. She got quiet and turned up the radio. Mike's spending time at the dojo now, not just watching. My uncle says it's good for the business because Mike knows people who can get deals on mats and gear. They put up new lights and a huge banner with my uncle and my mom in their dough box and then me on the end doing a jump kick. Mike kept calling it our gym even though it's not his. He made an Instagram for the dojang and posted a slow-mo of me breaking 3 boards with a caption about discipline and tagged me and my school. I didn't see it right away because I was at practice, but then my phone started blowing up. My mom texted me a bunch of clapping emojis and said, "You look so strong." When I got home, my dad had already seen it too because my aunt sent it to him. He just said, "Good form, bud," and then told me to ice my shin. The thing that really threw me was the speech. My mom told me at Subway after therapy that she wanted me to say something at the reception. I said I didn't want to talk about Mike in front of everybody, I'd do 2 minutes about her and then sit down. She squeezed my arm and said, "He's going to be your stepdad. It's important." The next day, Mike picked me up from school without telling me first and said he'd help me write it. He drove me to a coffee place and opened his notes app and typed "You taught me about consistency but spelled it wrong." He laughed and deleted it and told me to just say how much better things have been since he came into our lives. When I didn't answer, he said, "You don't have to say it if you don't feel it," and then, "But it would mean a lot to your mom." On the drive home he put his hand on the headrest behind me like he forgets I'm not a little kid. The dojang shot a promo video on Sunday. Mike invited a guy he knew to film and there were these bright lights and a fog machine that smelled like burnt plastic. I had to do a whole round with one of my uncle's adult students who's bigger than me. I blocked wrong and got clocked in the nose. Blood everywhere. My mom was across the mat and went white and ran over and kept saying sorry even though she wasn't the one who hit me. My uncle made a joke about authenticity for the camera, which would have been funny if my mouth didn't taste like pennies. The videographer asked if we could do one more for safety, and my uncle said no. Mike put his arm around my shoulder and told me, "You just got your first fight kiss," which is the grossest way to describe a nosebleed I've ever heard. At school on Monday I fell asleep in biology. The teacher tapped my desk and asked if I was feeling okay. I said I was fine, just busy. In therapy that week the therapist asked me to list stuff I'm choosing for myself and I couldn't think of anything, so he told me to pick one thing and say it out loud to my mom. In the car afterward I told her I wanted to stop the 6 a.m. Sunday runs, at least until after the wedding. She stared at the road and said, "But that's our time." I told her we already have Subway and therapy and the dojang and school pickup and I'm not a triathlete. She pulled into a Tim Hortons parking lot and cried a little and then said okay. It felt like winning a game I didn't know we were playing. My dad asked me to come by his place alone. He gave me a thin manila folder and said I didn't have to read it if I didn't want to. It was photocopies from a case, his case, from when I was a baby. There was a witness list with my mom's name on it and a paragraph where someone described a fight in a parking lot. It made me feel sick, not because of what happened, but because of how young their ages looked on paper. I brought it to my individual session and the therapist told me I don't have to decide who's right today. When I told my mom I'd seen it, she went quiet like she'd been waiting for this exact thing to happen. She said my dad always tries to rewrite things to make himself look better, and then she reached across the table and grabbed my hand and said, "You're not a case file." I didn't know what to say to that. The rehearsal dinner was last Friday at a Korean restaurant my uncle picked because he knows the owner. It was all family, my grandparents, my cousin, my uncle, Mike's daughter and niece, and my dad because my grandma insisted and my mom didn't have the energy to fight her about it. It was actually fine at first. People talked over each other. My uncle told the same story about breaking his first board for like the 10th time. Then Mike stood up with a soju glass and made a toast about second chances and found family, and he looked right at my dad when he said "and redemption." My dad didn't say anything. He just nodded once and set his chopsticks down. My mom tried to change the subject by asking my grandma about her knees. Then Mike said, louder, "Some people don't know what to do with a good thing." My dad stood up and asked me if I wanted to go grab soft serve down the block, which is what he always suggests when he doesn't want to fight. Mike laughed and said, "Run away, like always." My uncle shifted his chair back like he was about to get between them. I got in the middle and said I'd go to the bathroom. My mom started crying before I even took a step. The owner came over and asked if everything was okay. We left early. My dad texted me later that he was proud of me for not adding to the fire, which somehow made me feel worse. On Sunday, I found out something my mom hadn't told me. She'd asked my uncle to be my guardian for the day of, in case my dad bailed or caused a scene. She told me when we were in the car and added, "Just to take pressure off you." Then she asked me if I wanted Mike to legally adopt me after the wedding. Like she was asking if I wanted extra toppings on a pizza. I said I didn't. She stared straight ahead and said, "Okay. We don't have to think about that right now," like the words could be folded and put away in the glove compartment. Today was supposed to be a normal Tuesday. School, then the dojang, then home. At lunch I sat with my friend Kevin and a guy from my science group and tried not to think about the stupid speech. After school my uncle was late picking me up and I almost missed the session. When we got there, Mike was already in the back, messing with the speaker. He came over and did that thing where he squeezes the back of my neck like we're on a team. My mom stood by the front desk, counting sparring gear. Everything was ordinary in that busy, sweaty way it is there. I went home, showered, ate leftover japchae, and started writing the speech because I figured it would be worse if I put it off. I wrote a paragraph about my mom teaching me how to tie a dobok belt and got stuck on the next sentence. At 10:41 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number that said, "Hey, it's S." I didn't know who S was until the second text. "It's me, Steph. Mike's daughter. We've never texted before. Are you awake?" I said yeah. Then she called me. Her voice sounded tiny. She said, "Can you tell your mom to pick me up? They took my dad." I didn't understand at first. I asked, "Where are you?" She said the station on Broadway. I walked into the living room and my mom was already putting on her sneakers. She'd gotten a call too. My uncle was on speaker saying, "I'm coming." My dad texted, "Do you need me?" My mom grabbed her keys and looked at me like she didn't know if she should tell me to stay or come. I just put my shoes on. So now I'm sitting in a hard plastic chair under a fluorescent light that hums, holding my mom's warm coffee cup because her hands are shaking too much to hold it, and Mike's daughter is crying quietly into her sleeve. There's a bulletin board with missing pet posters and a laminated sign about noise. My uncle is pacing and then standing still, like he can't decide which one is more useful. Every once in a while, a door opens and a cop walks through and doesn't look at us. My mom hasn't said anything except "it's okay" over and over, like it's a spell. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my hands, so I'm just typing this on my phone. I keep thinking about how I started a sentence tonight and couldn't figure out what came next, and how now I don't know that answer in a different, heavier way. Update 3. They wouldn't let us see him. A woman at the desk with a ponytail and chipped blue nail polish took my mom's name and said he'll have a hearing in the morning and slid a form across the counter like it was a fast food receipt. When my mom asked what for, the woman didn't look up from her keyboard. She said, "Possession of stolen property over 5, breach," and then looked past us at the next person in line. My uncle whispered something under his breath and went outside and then came back inside and then walked to the water fountain and didn't drink. Steph's mascara had made gray puddles under her eyes. She said, "It's not stolen." They were closeouts, like she wasn't sure if that was a real word. My mom handed me her coffee because it was vibrating in her hand, and when I tilted it I could see the rainbow oil slick on top. The doors kept opening and closing, this big whoosh of cold air every time. At some point my dad showed up in a hoodie with the sleeves pushed up. He didn't say anything, he just sat down on the end and put his keys in a neat stack on his thigh. When my mom saw him she made the tiniest face, like she'd bitten down on a seed. He asked, "Do you want me to drive Steph home?" Without any "hey" or "how are you?" like he'd been waiting backstage and someone cued his line. We left at 2:12 a.m. The street was empty except for a guy pushing a shopping cart with a plastic bag fluttering from the side like a broken flag. My mom gripped the steering wheel with both hands and didn't turn the radio on. Steph's house had one porch light on and a dog that started barking the second the car pulled up. She hugged my mom through the window and said I'm sorry as if she'd done something wrong. When we got home, my mom sat on the edge of the couch with her coat still on and said, "I'll fix it," to nobody, like it was something that fell behind the fridge. In the morning she put on mascara and then took it off and then put it on again. We went downtown. The courthouse had that weird echo where your footsteps sound like someone else is walking with you. At security I had to take my belt off and hold my pants up with my wrist. It felt stupid to be thinking about belts when I spend so much of my life tying one. Inside the courtroom the benches were splintery and everyone was either whispering or pretending not to look at each other. When they brought Mike in he was in the same hoodie from the dojang, sleeves shoved to the elbows like he was about to fix a sink. He tried to smile at us. It looked like the expression he makes when a sparring drill actually hurts. The Crown said sentences that sounded like Lego blocks snapping together. Ongoing investigation. Sporting goods warehouse. Community center storage. Serial numbers filed off. He said Instagram evidence, and my stomach did that roller coaster drop. He held up a piece of paper and said, "A May 23rd post advertising discounted mats and helmets through the defendant's contacts," and I could picture the post in my head, the slow-motion boards and the caption about discipline under it like a dare. They said he'd breached before, that he'd missed a check-in. My mom kept touching the base of her throat with her thumb, and every time the judge said something new, her thumb paused and then slid back up to her chin. They asked if anyone would act as a surety, like stand up and say they'd be responsible. My mom said, "I will," before the sentence even finished. The judge asked her questions like it was a job interview. Where would he live? How would she make sure? My mom answered like she was reading off a script she wrote at 3 a.m. The Crown shook his head. The judge looked at his hands for a long time and then said, "Bail is denied at this time." It was so quiet I could hear the high buzz and the lights again. Mike turned his head toward us like he didn't understand the words, or like if he could see our faces they would change the sound of them. Then a sheriff touched his elbow and he was gone. We walked back into the city noise and it felt fake, like someone playing city sounds from a speaker. My mom sat on a concrete planter and took her ring off and rubbed the pale line it left and then slid it back on. She said, "It's a pause, it's not a stop." When we got home she opened her binder and called the venue and said words like rain check and credit, and when she hung up she called the florist and said, "It's not your fault," and then she called no one but stared at her phone like it was a person who had just decided to ghost her. School found out before we even got to the dojang. Someone sent me a screenshot of a local news article with our banner in the background like an accident. Outdoor equipment theft ring busted. There was a picture of a white van with the back open and blue foam mats stacked inside in perfect little towers, like a cartoon thief staged the shot. The caption had Mike's full name. The comments were a mess, laugh emojis, someone from my old soccer team asking if we had any discount mouthguards left. I muted everything and shoved my phone in my locker till last period. Cops came to the dojang in the afternoon with 2 hard cases and those little green evidence stickers. They were polite, which almost made it worse. They asked my uncle if they could look in the storage closet and he said, "Yes, of course," in this weird formal voice he doesn't use with anyone. They opened boxes and took photos from knees level like box paparazzi. When one of the cops peeled a sticker and pressed it down on a cardboard flap, the sound was exactly like tape but higher. My face was on the big banner on the wall. I could see myself smiling with my leg up, frozen in a kick, and I suddenly wanted to go up there and yank the whole thing down. But my mom was standing near it with her hands clasped like a prayer and I knew if I touched anything she'd think I was trying to break something she could still fix. Mike's videographer posted a thoughts and prayers story over a clip of my nose bleeding, like the universe has a sense of humor. I told my uncle I wanted all the videos with my face gone. I told my mom in the car after therapy, because the therapist made me pick one thing for myself again and my brain finally coughed up that as a sentence I could finish. She stared at the steering wheel for a long time and then said, "It's good for the business," because she can only hear certain parts of a sentence at first. I said, "I'm not the business." She nodded and didn't move. Then she unlocked her phone and texted my uncle. The videos were gone before dinner. On the dojang page the grid looked like a mouth with a tooth missing. Steph texted me at midnight. She said her mom told her not to go to the courthouse, and she didn't, and she feels guilty for not going anyway. She said she found a white trash bag under her dad's bed last week with brand new shin guards in it and tags still on and he told her not to worry about it, that he was just holding stuff for a friend and everyone does it. She said she didn't delete anything. I didn't know what the right response was so I sent a photo of my cat sleeping with his paw over his eyes and she sent back a photo of her ceiling with a glow-in-the-dark star peeling at the corner. My dad picked me up from the dojang and drove past our street instead of turning. I didn't ask where we were going. He parked in front of a Dairy Queen that was closed and pointed at the picture of a cone lit up in the window anyway. He said, "You don't have to do a speech." I said, "I'm not." He nodded like he'd already known. He handed me a folded piece of paper. It had a number on it. He said, "If your mom needs a lawyer who will actually call her back," and then he stopped because he didn't need to finish. I put it in my pocket like it was something fragile. When we got home my mom was at the kitchen table with her taekwondo belt in front of her, not tied, just stretched out like a road. She looked up at me and opened her mouth and closed it again. Then she said, "I'm proud of you," but her voice did a waver on proud and made it sound like the opposite. She told me she emailed the school to tell them I might be late a couple mornings. She asked me if Subway tomorrow sounded good. She didn't talk about adoption, or the wedding, or anything with an answer you could write down. I went to my room and opened the notes app where the speech draft was and held my thumb on the screen, until all the words shook and then I hit delete. The little cursor blinked in the top corner like a heartbeat. I let it pulse for a while and then turned the screen face down on the desk. Update 4. The number my dad wrote down on that folded paper works. My mom called it at 6:08 a.m. while I was standing at the counter pouring cereal and somehow spilling it on the only clean spot. She put it on speaker and said, "Hi, Mr. Patel, and then said her whole name like she was reading it off a test. He sounded like someone who never has to guess at what comes next. He said bail review and release plan and conditions and told her not to talk to anyone else about anything without him. My mom said okay after every sentence until it didn't sound like a word anymore. When she hung up, she wrote his number again on a post-it and stuck it to the fridge and then took it back down and stuck it inside her wallet, like she was hiding a bruise. Second period, the office called me down. The vice principal had a mug that said dog mom even though she doesn't have a dog, and the school resource officer was there with his vest half unzipped like he'd started to take it off and changed his mind. They asked if I had access to the Dojang Instagram and whether I'd ever helped promote merchandise and told me I could have a parent in the room. My phone was on do not disturb but I texted anyway and my dad replied with the dot bubbles before I even finished typing. He was there in 8 minutes, sneakers squeaking on the waxed floor. My mom was there in 10, eyes like she'd run up the stairs. For a second they stood in the doorway shoulder to shoulder and it looked like a picture I don't own. My dad said, he won't be giving a statement, and my mom said, we're getting counsel, on top of him like backup vocals. The officer did that thing where he presses his lips together to pretend he's still smiling. We sat in silence long enough to hear someone in the hallway drop a binder and swear. Then we left. In the parking lot my dad handed my mom the folded paper again and she took it with 2 fingers like it was a fragile bug she didn't want to kill. She said, thank you without looking at him. He said, call if you need me to drive him, and then corrected himself, drive you. Either of you. Nobody corrected him back. At the Dojang there was a piece of paper taped to the glass door with a city crest and a lot of numbers. Temporary closure pending safety review. Under that, someone had stuck our schedule with a strip of blue painter's tape and wrote check back in Sharpie like a flyer for a lost cat. Inside, the storage closet had yellow tape across it like a crime show prop. The mats looked the same as always, which made everything worse. The banner with my mom and my uncle and me, the kick frozen in the air, was still up, but somebody had thrown a handful of pennies at it and a couple were stuck to the vinyl with scotch tape like eyes. Parents came to the door and stood outside and did the little head tilt people do when they're trying to be sympathetic and nosy at the same time. One guy I recognized from Tuesday nights crossed the street when he saw my uncle and pretended to look in a window of the vape shop. My uncle kept saying we will resume regular programming, like a TV station after a storm, but his voice kept catching on resume like a record skip. He took the banner down by himself. When he rolled it up, my face creased and disappeared first. Steph texted me at 3:14, can you talk? We met at the library because it's the only indoor place in our neighborhood where you can be quiet for free. She sat in the chair with her knees pulled up and her shoelaces dragging, and her voice was so small the librarian kept looking at us like we were plotting. She said her dad called her collect and said he needed his phone out of the garage and the black backpack from the top shelf and to delete a thing, and she said, no, and then she felt like she was going to throw up for an hour. She asked me if I hate him. I said I don't know. She nodded like that was the right answer, which felt like cheating. On the way home, my mom kept one hand on the wheel and one hand on the lawyer's business card like it might blow away. I told her what Steph said, and for a second her face did every expression at once. She pulled into the same Tim Hortons parking lot where I won the right to sleep on Sundays and called Mr. Patel. She said, he's asking kids to touch things, and listen for a long time, then said right. Yes. I won't. She squeezed the phone so hard the case squeaked. After she hung up she sat there with the engine running and said, thank you, to me, like I'd put out a small fire nobody saw starting. Therapy at 4. The room smelled like peppermint and the chair I always choose has a thread sticking out on the arm that I pull without meaning to. The therapist asked me to pick one more thing I'm not doing. My mom was watching me like we were at a store and I was about to point at something expensive. I said I didn't want to compete this summer. I said I'd still go to class sometimes, but not tournaments, not the fight team, not pictures. I stared at the carpet until it looked like a topographical map. My mom's hands were in her lap and her thumb did the same trip up and down her throat it did in court. She said, okay, and it sounded like a different word than the one she'd been saying all day. The therapist asked me if there was anything I did want. I said a haircut without a photo of anyone else. We went straight to the barber. The cape smelled like the inside of a lunchbox. The barber asked me what I wanted and I said just not Mike, and he laughed like he didn't know who that was. When he was done my hair looked like me, not like anybody else's old picture trying to grow back. My mom took a photo on her phone and then didn't post it anywhere. She just put it in her favorites and that was it. At 7:26 the news did a story with a drone shot that made our block look like a video game. They blurred my face on the practice clip I didn't know they had. A youth athlete, the anchor said, like I was a species. The comments under the station's Facebook post were a junkyard. My grandma called to ask if there was any food in the house and then showed up with 2 foil pans of japchae like she hadn't asked. At 9:03 someone spray-painted thief kicks on our roll-up door in letters that dripped like a bloody nose. My uncle dragged out a bucket and a stiff brush and my mom went to get more rags, but we were almost out because she'd already used most of them to clean the baseboards for no reason. I went with my uncle and we scrubbed in circles under the streetlight. The paint came off in orange streaks and stained our fingers and turned the water in the bucket the color of rust. My mom came back with a magic eraser tucked under her arm like a secret weapon. She kept saying, "It's just letters," and then scrubbing as if the wall could answer back. While we were crouched there a kid rode by on a bike and yelled "Hiya," with his voice cracking in the middle. My uncle said, not loud, I should have told him no, and I knew he didn't mean the kid. He looked at me and said, still not loud, I'm sorry for putting you on camera, and I had to look away because he never says sorry for anything, not even when he steps on your foot. The bail review is set for next week. Mr. Patel says probably house arrest if they grant it. No social media, no contact with minors, no employment at the gym. My mom repeated those words back like she was trying to memorize choreography. No, no, no. She put her ring in a small glass bowl on the windowsill and didn't take it out while she was on the phone with the venue again. She switched we to I without hesitating. I will take the credit, she said. I will take the loss. Today at lunch, Kevin slid me half his grilled cheese and asked if I wanted to ditch last period and go to the river. I stared at him for a second and then said yes, and saying yes felt like choosing a language I forgot I spoke. We sat on the metal railing and watched a dog try to figure out a stick that was bigger than its entire belief system. I thought about belts and knots and how a thing can hold you up or tie you down and sometimes it's the same rope. My phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again and I still didn't. I put it face down on the railing and watched the river move anyway, which felt a little like finishing a sentence even if I didn't know what came after. When I got home my mom was at the kitchen table with her dobok folded into a perfect square, belt laid on top like a road. She said, Subway tomorrow? And then, no, wait, do you want something else? I told her I wanted to try the Vietnamese place by the laundromat with the neon open that flickers like a heartbeat. She wrote it down like it was part of the plan. Later, I went to the dojang by myself to get my mouth guard and a t-shirt I actually like. The door was taped but not locked yet. Inside it smelled like cleaner and old sweat and a little like pennies again no matter how many times we mopped. On the corkboard there was a photo stuck with 2 tacks of me and my mom bowing to each other at my first belt test. I took it down and put it in my backpack. On the way out I tied my belt around the handle of the storage closet, not tight, just enough so it wouldn't swing open if a draft hit it. It looked like a seatbelt on a door, and for the first time all week that made sense.